Hello and welcome, everyone. In a vast democracy like ours in India, major decisions are never made by just one person. It's actually a team effort, where key institutions have to work together. Today, we're going to take a closer look at two of the most important roles in our government, the President and the Prime Minister. We'll try to understand exactly how they work together within our parliamentary system.
So, here's what we have on our agenda. First, we'll understand what it means to be the head of the state. Then we'll unpack this really important idea of nominal versus real power. After that, we'll see how our president is elected, look at the powers they hold, and finally, we'll compare our parliamentary system with the presidential system you see in other countries.
All right, let's dive into our first topic. Every country needs a figurehead, someone who represents the entire nation as a single unified entity. This person is often called the first citizen of the country.
The official term for this role is the head of state. Now, what does that really mean? It means this person holds the highest formal position in the country. They are the symbolic leader of the whole nation, representing all of us.
And in our country, India, this very important job of being the head of state belongs to the president. But this brings up a really interesting question. If the president is the head, does that mean they run the day-to-day government? Well, not exactly.
And that leads us to our next big idea. The difference between someone who is the head in name and the person who actually uses the real power of the government. So, let's find out who really calls the shots.
This table really helps us see the difference clearly. On one hand, you have the president, who is the head of the state. But on the other hand, we have the prime minister, who is the head of the government. So while the president has the highest formal position, it's actually the prime minister who uses all the governmental powers and takes most of the big decisions in cabinet meetings. That's why we say the president's powers are nominal, which really just means in name only.
Here's a comparison that makes it super clear. Think of the President of India like the Queen of Britain. Her role is very important, but it's largely ceremonial. In the same way, our president's main job is to supervise how all our political institutions are working, just to make sure they all function together smoothly.
So, if the president is supposed to represent the entire nation, how is this person chosen? Well, the way we elect our president is actually quite different from how we elect, say, a member of parliament. Let's have a look.
Now, this is a very, very important point. We, the citizens of India, don't vote directly for the president. It's what we call an indirect election. So you and I don't go to a polling booth to choose the president.
So how does it work? It's pretty straightforward. First, a special group called an electoral college is formed. This group is made up of all the elected members of parliament, the MPs, and the elected members of the state legislative assemblies, the MLAs. These are the people we vote for. They then vote on our behalf to elect the president. This whole process makes sure that the person who wins truly represents the entire nation, not just one part of it.
Okay, so we've said the president's role is mostly nominal. But the Constitution still gives the president some very significant powers. So it makes you wonder, are these powers really just for show?
It's a perfectly good question, right? If the Prime Minister and the Cabinet are taking most of the decisions, what does the President actually do all day? Well, let's look at the powers the Constitution gives them.
If you just read the Constitution, you might think the president is the most powerful person in the country. All government orders are issued in the president's name. A bill that is passed in Parliament can only become a law after the president signs it. The president also appoints very important people, like the Chief Justice of India, the governors of states, and the election commissioners. And on top of all that, the president is the supreme commander of our armed forces.
But, and this is the most important part, there's a catch. The president can use all these powers only on the advice of the Council of Ministers, which is headed by the Prime Minister. Now, the president can ask them to rethink their advice once. But if the ministers give the same advice again, the president has to accept it.
There is, however, one very crucial situation where the president can use their own judgment. We call this discretionary power. This happens when, after an election, no single party gets a clear majority of seats in the Lok Sabha. In that case, the president has to use their wisdom to choose and appoint a prime minister who they believe can win the support of the majority.
So this entire structure that we've been discussing, with a president as the nominal head and a prime minister as the real head, is what we call a parliamentary system. To really get a good grip on it, it's quite helpful to compare it with the other main model of democracy, which is the presidential system.
In a parliamentary system like ours in India, the parliament is considered supreme. Why? because it's the group of representatives who have been directly elected by the people. So, they hold the ultimate authority, and the government can only be in power as long as it has the support of the majority in Parliament.
Let's look at the key differences side by side. In our parliamentary system, the head of state, our president, and the head of government, our prime minister, are two different people, and the prime minister must have majority support in parliament. Now compare that to the presidential system, for example, in the USA. There, the president is both the head of state and the head of government. They're directly elected by the people for a fixed term and don't need to have majority support in their legislature to stay in power.
All right, so let's quickly go over the most important points from our discussion today. First, the president is the symbolic head of state in India. Second, the prime minister is the actual functional head of the government. Third, the real power to run the country lies with the prime minister and the council of ministers. And finally, this entire structure is the foundation of our parliamentary system of government.
To finish, I'd like to leave you with something to think about. We've learned that the president usually has to follow the prime minister's advice. But what if there's a serious disagreement between them on a really important policy? Does the prime minister's view always win? It's a fascinating question that really goes to the heart of the balance of power in our democracy. Thank you so much for joining me today.